Hello, everybody. Happy SC2. I am excited to be here with you all today, virtually that is. I hope you guys have taken a lot away from the event so far. I know our lineup of speakers have just been unbelievable, so I'm sure you have a lot of things to take away and implement and take action on. And I know that one of the ways that we tend to take action on things in our business is by doing demos and implementing the things that we learn there. And how do you get demos in your schedule? You make phone calls. And that's why I'm really excited to give this message today on phoning like a champion. And I know that across the board, phoning is probably the least enjoyable part about the job, as you might feel. And that's why I'm excited to give you guys some tips and tricks and just some best practices about making phone calls, but also maximizing each call as well when you're actually talking to a customer. So in terms of making phone calls, sometimes it can be hard to find almost the motivation to get on the phone. And one of the ways that I have found to be really helpful in getting that motivation is breaking it down to the ridiculous. You may have heard of this phrase. I believe it's a Hal Elrod phrase, but breaking it down to the ridiculous, this means knowing your magic number. And when I say magic number, what I mean by that is knowing how much money you actually make per phone call. So not knowing how much money you make per demo, I'm talking about knowing how much money you make per phone call. So here's how you find this. And I'm going to go over the calculation. I would probably write this down so you can go calculate it out later. There's a lot on this slide. I'm going to break it down pretty simple. So the first thing you're going to calculate is how many phone calls does it take you to book 10 demos? So you can go back and find this in your queue actually. How many phone calls does it take you to book 10 demos? For me, it was about 100. So it was about every 10 phone calls I made, I'd book one demo. So to book 10 demos, it was about 100 calls. So you can see up top the phrase, and then the second portion, you can see the actual calculation. So for me, it was about 100 calls. The next thing you want to calculate is how many of those demos will you actually complete? So we know that, we don't complete 100% of the demos that we book because of reschedules, cancels, things like that. If you complete 100% of the demos that you book, you should probably be giving this message. That's awesome, but that's just not the norm. So again, I'm going to use my numbers here. So for me, it was about 80% completion ratio. So if I booked 10 demos, I'd usually complete about 8. Of those completed demos, how many sales will you get? So of those demos, how many sales will you get? So for me, same deal, about 80% closing ratio. So what that means is I would get about 6.4 sales. So you multiply that by your average order size. So for me, $700, 6.4 times 700 comes out to be about $4,400. So you're going to take your total sales and multiply that by your commission percentage. So when I was making 50%, I'd multiply it by 0.5. And then I would take the total earnings divided by those 100 calls. So for me, what I ended up calculating was that for every phone call that I made $22. Talk about motivation. Okay, so that doesn't have to be your number. Even if I was sitting across from you and handing you a $5 bill every single time that you made a phone call, I bet you'd be making a lot of phone calls. That's the part that you have to remember that can be tough to recognize in the moment, this instant versus delayed gratification. If I were sitting across from you, handing you a $5 bill, you'd be making a ton of calls. It's tough to recognize when you're making phone calls of, it's actually the exact same amount, I just don't get paid up front. I get paid at the end of the week. And when you can start to make that recognition, it gives you a lot more motivation to get on the phone. So I highly recommend you spending some time after this, breaking it down to the ridiculous, knowing your magic number. That way, next time you get on the phone and you make 20 calls, you know that you at least made X amount. It helps a lot. Okay, next thing is you have to be a master of your schedule. And what I mean by this is really this whole mentality of boss versus employee. It's really easy in this job, as you've noticed throughout the summer, that you're your own boss. And it's easy to almost fall into that trap sometimes because you get to pick your own schedule. You get to pick when you want to work, when you don't, when you do your demos, when you phone. You get to choose that. And sometimes it allows us to fall victim to ourselves in a way. So You get to pick your schedule and be the boss, but at that point, you have to be an employee of your schedule. When you have something in your schedule, you have to follow through with it. We've all had that experience where because you're your own boss and something comes up during times that you were supposed to make phone calls, what happens? Oh, you know what? I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it later. This thing came up. Whatever. That's no good. We can't get into that habit. You have to be an employee of your schedule. And if something's in your schedule, you got to do it. So you have to respect the phone time that's in your schedule. If you've got phone time in your schedule, just follow through with it. Know that it's going to result you in a lot more than you think. Okay? If you have a rescheduled appointment, if you had an appointment in your schedule that fell through, or maybe they had to reschedule or forgot about you, whatever the situation is, you should still work for that hour. You should turn it into phone time. You always want to have your phone time first in your schedule and then your appointments. Respect your phone time. The only way to get demos in your schedule is to make phone calls. You have to schedule it out. No one is ever just like in the mood to make phone calls. The only way somebody makes phone calls is when it's scheduled and somebody follows through with it. So be an employee of your schedule. Okay, next thing, when you're actually on the phone, it's important to be memorable. You really want to make them laugh on the phone. I believe, in my opinion, that's the easiest way to be memorable on the phone. There's that whole quote of, I'm going to not say it right, but people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. That's very true. And one of the best ways to make somebody feel something is to get them to laugh. There's tons of studies or whatever that say that laughter promotes a positive feeling in your body. So if you can get somebody to laugh, that's really memorable for them. So these are just a couple of quick jokes that you can use on the phone if that's in your personality. So some of the ones that I like to use, I don't use a ton of jokes, but I always like to say this first one. When somebody says, how long will it take? Oh, how long is it going to take? Oh, it's only like, 6-7 hours. How's your Wi-Fi connection? And they kind of pause and they're like, is she being serious? Right? And you're like, I'm totally kidding, Mrs. Jones. It's only like 45 to 60 minutes. What does that also do? It makes them laugh, and it makes this hour window seem so small compared to 6 to 7 hours. You're putting it into perspective for them as well. They always laugh at it. They're like, huh, that was a good joke. Can you imagine? 6-7 hours, crazy. Some other ones that you can use. What are you selling? Oh, submarine screen doors. Pause. They're like, what? Inflatable dartboards. What are you selling? Oh, we're selling baby alligators, but don't worry, they come muzzled. They're like, what? And it always makes them laugh every single time. When you make an impression on somebody, that's when you get an appointment. Think about it. If you were gonna agree to sit down with somebody for 45 to 60 minutes, would you wanna sit down with somebody that's super monotone and boring? Or would you wanna sit down with somebody that's exciting and made you laugh and made an impression on you? Probably more likely to sit down with somebody that made an impression. Make an impression, get a demo. All right, let's talk about the firm up. We've all been through reschedules, people forgetting about us, cancellations. I believe that one of the biggest ways to get around that is the last part of your phone call, the firm up. So first of all, you want to thank them an absolute ton for booking the presentation with you. And be genuine. People can tell when you're genuinely thanking them. So Mrs. Jones, thank you so much. I cannot tell you how much this appointment means to me. Your help really does not go unappreciated. And real quick, do you have a pen and paper that you could just jot a couple things down for me? It'll be really fast. Okay, awesome. So if you want to go ahead and write down my full name, it's Colleen Dolan. And then if you want to write down the time that I'll be calling, so Saturday at 11 a.m. And then if you would go ahead and jot down our appointment confirmation number. It's 514-611-68. That's your rep number. If the customer asks what that's for, I always say, oh, that's just in case my manager wants to call in and check up on the appointment. He probably won't. He very rarely does, but that's just in case. I'm like, okay, cool. Thank you so much again, Mrs. Jones. This really helps me out. Talk to you Saturday. What this appointment confirmation number does is it legitimizes the presentation. It makes the customer think like, oh, this is like a real appointment in my schedule. I better make sure that this is in my calendar because she's really counting on this appointment. It firms up the appointment, and trust me when I say, when I started doing this, I experienced way less cancels, way less reschedules, and it was awesome. So always give them an appointment confirmation number. Okay. Additionally, you always, when you're actually on the phone with a customer, you always want to tell the customer how you want them to feel. And you have to keep in mind that you control the conversation. You called them. You get to guide the customer through this process and tell them how you want them to feel. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we've all had a situation on the phone where you're talking to a customer, and instead of being really excited that you want to do a demo with them, they might say something like, oh, you know what, we already have Cutco. There's a couple different ways that you can respond to this that can completely shift the way the customer feels about this statement of, oh, we already have Cutco. What I've heard reps say is, oh, you do? Oh, okay, well, I do get paid just to show it, blah, 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 blah. The other way that you can say this is, oh my gosh, that's great. How long have you had it? Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Well, just, I do get paid just to show it, so you do not have to get anything, and I'm really working hard to hit my goal, so blah, blah, blah. See the difference between, it's basically the same thing, but I'm adding a phrase of, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Now the customer feels awesome about the fact that they already have Cutco because you told them to feel awesome. Another example is, oh, you know what? We've seen the presentation before. We've seen it a bunch of times, so, sorry about that. It's like they don't even say no, right? They're just like, oh, sorry, we've seen it before. And a lot of times what a rep will say is, oh, got it. Okay, well, I do get paid just to show it, and, voice inflection goes down, right? They're almost discouraged by it. A customer hears that and they're like, oh, yep, they get it. It's not going to happen. Okay, verse saying, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, you know what, Mrs. Jones, you probably know the presentation better than I do at this point. So I'm sure you could give me some tips. And like I said, I get paid just to show it, so you do not have to get anything. So blah, blah, blah. Complete difference in response and how the customer feels in response to your response. Additionally, I just had a conversation with a rep in our office. This is just another example of this, but I had a conversation with a rep in our office that was talking to a customer, asking him if they knew how to use Zoom. And they were talking about the appointment, they booked it, they said, oh yeah, are you familiar with Zoom? And the customer said, oh yeah, I use Zoom for work. And the rep said, oh, you know what, well, sorry, you're probably pretty sick of it at this point, but I'll make it fun. And he was trying to be light about it of, oh yeah, I'll make it fun, blah, 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 trying to make a joke out of it almost. He was still booked the appointment. And what I said to him afterwards, I said, you should try telling the customer how you want them to feel. So instead of apologizing for the fact that it's on Zoom, what if instead you said, oh my gosh, that's awesome. So you know exactly how to use it. This will be a breeze. There's a complete difference in the way the customer is now logging onto that presentation. Before, the customer may have logged on and said, and been subconsciously thinking, oh, I'm sick of this. I do this for work already. Don't want to be on Zoom. Compared to, oh, this is a breeze. I know exactly how to do this. You get to tell the customer how you want them to feel. You're in complete control of the presentation and in control of the phone call. So, phone like the champion that you are, we're about to dive into some phone calls. And this phone jam is really going to be the first action step that you can take in terms of implementing and taking action on the things that you've learned here today. Really dive in with this. Let's get after it. Thanks so much.